Now, today, a particular focus on vaccine mandates. Now, I know this is a hot button issue for many people, but regardless of where you sit in terms of being an anti-vaxxer or anti-vaccine mandates, should people who have that view have the same rights as you to voice that opinion, or should they be shut down for the freedom of the rest of us? I mean, hey, maybe this is a spent issue because, hey, this was a couple of years ago, but like long COVID, it's got a bit of a tail on it. Joining us on the program now, CEO of the Free Speech Union, Jonathan Ayling. Jonathan, kia ora, thank you so much for your time today.
Morning, Andrew. Always great to sit down with you. Hey, look, great introduction there. I really like the emphasis you bring on the way that we often fixate on voting as being the essence of democracy. And that's true. But I would say voting is actually the icing on the cake. It's the culmination of our democratic freedoms and liberties. So absolutely, we should all be considering who we're going to vote for and actually vote come October. But let's not forget that democracy is about a whole lot of freedoms that we express before we get to the voting booth, before we tick that box. And free speech is the foundation of all of them.
I mean, this is the basis of our democracy. Even people that we disagree with get to vote. It's the way it is. However, look, I'm not going to ask you your views on the vaccines or the mandates or anything like that because, well, firstly, it's none of my business. However, if somebody has a different opinion to me on this controversial issue, they should still have the right to talk about that. And in particular, if because of their view, and in particular talking about a nurse, Suzanne Smith, is her name. She was told by an employer, well, a previous employer, not only has she lost her job, but she can't talk to anybody about that process. Free Speech Union saying, oh, yes, we can, right?
Egregious stuff, and this is red rag to a bull type thing. When not only has she lost her job because of the COVID mandates, but she's actually been disciplined by the Professional Conduct Committee by the Nursing Council, and is now going to the Health Disciplinary Tribunal, where she could face $30,000 fine after being deregistered from a profession that she's trained for and was very good at, apparently, for spreading what they considered misinformation. And look, I will maybe show my cards a little bit here by saying I think there are some down and out wacky ideas out there about nanotechnology and what the vaccine does, and I don't have much time for it, but I am happy to spend my days dedicated to defending individuals' rights to speak out and to say what they believe, no matter how wacky I find it. Because you know what? Time and time again on this issue and many others, the mainstream and the non-wacky has been proven to be entirely incorrect. And so do I think that is the case on this issue? No, not necessarily. But we don't get to find that out on this issue or any other issue that comes down the line unless we maintain this radical perspective that people who we think are wrong should still be allowed to speak.
Flat earthers are people too, right?
That's exactly right. And you know, there's troubling similarities between the treatment of the medical practitioners that were in China that first began to speak out about this virus that was emerging, that became COVID, and the way we're treating student health practitioners now. And you say COVID's over, that it's not really a subject on people's minds anymore. I agree. I say fantastic, but there are still mandates in place that are very much on the minds of those who struggle with their freedom of conscience and freedom of belief in terms of what the right approach is there. And so this is where we are concerned by the treatment of student health professionals. We're not taking a stand against mandates, but we do think that they should be allowed to express themselves freely without facing deregistration. This is true for nurses, but professional bodies oversee many different professions. You know, lawyers have the Law Society, teachers have the Teaching Council. And what we're seeing more and more is this ideological capture of some of these professional groups to push for groupthink, to allow only one perspective to have sway. And so the fact that the PCC, on no authority of, as far as we can tell, and for no justification, said not only are we going to find you, you know, having broken these rules, broken the code of conduct, but don't you dare talk to anyone about it. Well, we said, well, how about we send it round to 100,000 people on our mailing list and let's talk about it on the radio. Does that count? So bite me, nursing council. And now we're going to the health disciplinary tribunal and say, just like the High Court did several months back with this, or several weeks back with the Sue Gray case.
Yep.
That was a lawyer, which the High Court said lawyers have a responsibility in how they use their free speech, but they have no fewer freedoms than everyday citizens. And it's the same for nurses. They have no fewer freedoms. They have no less right to free speech just because they're a nurse, just because they're a teacher, just because they're a lawyer. And we will not back down on this.
And this is something which it's easy for individuals who have, stood up for a cause that they believe in and lost a lot, for them to feel intimidated and go, oh gosh, is it worth it anymore? It's easy for individuals to be, I suppose, separated from the herd and just told, this is what you should think, this is what you should believe, this is what you should say or not say. So important for, I mean, hey, even if we disagree with their opinion, to say, no, you've got the right to, I suppose, to support that person, to communicate their views publicly.
That's absolutely right. And a saying that I really like is stiffened spines stiffen spines. And what is really concerning to me are the number of individuals who have self-censored, who have been willing to back down on this issue as something that they care about. And I have a lot of respect, even though I do disagree with many on the issue around COVID and vaccination. I have a lot of respect for those who are willing to stand up and say, no, I will not be bullied into a position that I don't agree with. And I think society is well served when we are all willing to, hopefully respectfully and politely and civilly, but courageously express ourselves and hold our ground and make our stand. And I think we all contribute to the marketplace of ideas at that point. The marketplace of ideas doesn't work if there are artificial monopolies that are controlling which ideas hold sway. Just as in an economic market, a monopoly shuts down the free market. And in the marketplace of ideas, we need to have that freedom to express ourselves. And so, we're going to talk about The River of Freedom as well, yep. This documentary film that's recently come out. The polling that was released around the time of the occupation at Parliament showed that as many as a third of Kiwis supported what was happening in Parliament. Now, obviously, nowhere near that number didn't get vaccinated. Vaccination was up, 97, 98%. So there were a lot of people who supported the stand against mandates, who wanted a more open conversation, who wanted to be able to raise concerns and ask questions, but who were willing to get vaccinated. And so I think we have a lot to owe to those who are willing to pay the price to stand up and speak openly.
Now, I haven't had a chance to see the documentary River of Freedom. I again, happy to show my cards, fully vaccinated individual. However, as you say, there was, I suppose, some generalizations made about the sort of people that were protesting. And that's, I suppose, it's another way of isolating people and shutting them down, is to brand them as crazies, to say, oh, yeah, they're all tinfoil hat wearers, they're all fringe dwellers, they're such a minority. But isn't that the point? That, yes, okay, they're not in the majority, but they still have the same human rights as people with louder voices and more political power in this regard. One of the things that I've seen, and look, disclaimer, I've seen the trailer, I haven't seen the documentary, but one of the things that I think it shows well is that the sort of people that were in Wellington protesting the mandates rather than the vaccinations in particular weren't totally dissimilar to people like you and me. They weren't the type of fringe crazies that the government and some media organisations were painting them to be.
That's absolutely correct. And Michael Wood's claim that they were a river of filth is such an indictment, I think, on, I use this term sparingly, but on kind of the elites who have such a condescending view of Kiwis who would dare speak out against the prevailing narrative. Yeah. And certainly he wasn't alone, but that comment to me just indicated such contempt that exists within our political class for everyday Kiwis. And sure, there were individuals there who hold perspectives that I consider wacky.
Yeah.
But they're allowed to express that. And importantly, there were individuals there who I think hold very mainstream views, who are simply joining their voice with others to retain these basic freedoms. And I think that's what we need to orientate ourselves towards. Look, I'm not gonna claim to be, you know, a spokesman for the working class, but there is a really condescending elitist perspective for the bricklayer in Tai Happy and his rights to contribute to these discussions as well. And I would say, sure, we see it expressed at the occupation at Parliament and across numerous other issues today as well. These aren't people with formal qualifications in comms. They don't have their lines really succinct. It's not super articulate. And is that going to be the criteria that we require individuals to have now? Are you all coming on this really condensed, concise perspective that's easily articulated and understood? That's not what happened. And journalists really tore into the occupation of Parliament because of that. But I say, I'm really glad that our bricklayers haven't spent their lives studying comms. I'm really glad that our plumbers actually know how to do plumbing rather than their concise writing, you know. So there was real condescension there, and I think what comes through in the documentary is a very, very different story to what the mainstream public or everyday Kiwis have been presented on what happened at Parliament. I'm not taking a stance on agreeing or disagreeing with it, but it is different to the narrative that has been presented, and I feel I am richer for having considered it, and I feel many other Kiwis will also appreciate, no matter their perspectives on the substance of the claims, having engaged with those ideas.
Now, you probably know more than most about what happened in Wellington at the time, and I'm sure this is something that you have been involved with and talking to people who were involved. Having said that, though, did you learn something? Do you now know more about what happened at the protests from watching the documentary? Was it an eye-opener for you?
Oh, absolutely. Again, probably the basic facts of the matter were relatively clear in my mind, but the perspectives and the claims and the composition of that occupation is very different as well. What comes through, and my Marxist friends will be glad to hear me talking in these terms. You know, the far right activist that I am. The working class nature of this protest really came through. The Maori contingent of the occupation was very strong as well, and I think it flies in the face of the identity politicians that want to say, you know, if you're pushing against COVID mandate, it's because you're an ignorant cis white Christian male, you know, and what came through there was something very different, and I think it puzzles those who want to put all dissenters in one box. It doesn't work like that. Free speech doesn't exist in one box. It covers the spectrum as a tool for all of us to move together, and I think that came out really clearly. Likewise, the fact that the issue wasn't with the police there. I've met with the commissioner several times recently on this issue and others to discuss the response. And to be honest, I'm proud of the New Zealand police and the way that they are trying to engage with what it means to continue to preserve free speech in this country. The issue at Parliament was with our leaders. It was with our politicians, every one of them, without exception, failing to do their duty, to go and listen and engage with those that they're called to represent. And I find it condemnable, almost unforgivable, the way that those protesters were treated, and it entirely inflamed the situation. There was no reason a cross-party group couldn't go out and say, you're wrong, you're cranks, you've been deceived, what a bunch of wacky perspectives you had. You don't have to go and agree with them, but you go and you say, we acknowledge you as Kiwi citizens, we acknowledge you as members of our community, and we're here to listen. And I think Marama Fox, the formerly of the Māori Party, who was in Parliament, went and spent time there and listened. And I say, mihi to her work, an incredible reflection on what a humble leader looks like in that environment. Marama and I probably have disagreed on many other issues, but I found her example there inspiring.
And in contrast to that, at the time, Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robinson saying these people have lost their right to protest. Now, this was somebody who occupied the Victoria University Registrar building when he was a student on a cause that he believed in. But to be able to say these people have rights and these people we can take away their rights, dangerous stuff indeed. Now, that movie is available in select cinemas nationwide. If you go to flicks.co.nz, you'll find out, look, if you are interested in seeing it, whatever your view on this particular issue, this is a significant event in New Zealand history. I would recommend that you check it out. I certainly will be in the next week or so. If you're not off to the movies, though, particularly if you are in Hamilton, off to a debate, again, on a bit of a hot button issue. This seems to be your specialty, Jonathan.
Well, there's no point in debating something we all agree on. So we worked hard to try and find something where there's a need for us to open up these conversations, and co-governance is definitely one of them. So the third debate in our 2023 debate series, we started in Dunedin with a debate on the appropriate response to reach net zero. Second debate was on whether our tax system is fair last Monday in Wellington. And this Wednesday the 13th, at the atrium at the Wintec campus in Hamilton, former Minister Shane Jones is going up against former Race Relations Commissioner Meng Foon. Shane Jones has been supported by former Director of Hobson's Pledge Casey Costello, and the former Director of the Waitangi Tribunal Buddy Makaire is joining Meng Foon as well. And we're debating one person, one vote. Silences Indigenous voice and must go. And so, of course, we'll be hearing a debate around co-governance, around the way we conceive of democracy in New Zealand, and try and open up this conversation. You know, Andrew, we all know that there's been a lot of noise around this issue over the past 6 months. Whether there's been much open debate, whether there's been a contest of ideas, perhaps not. And so hopefully we're able to hear from both sides. And I have no doubt that both sides will benefit from hearing the perspectives in this debate. So that's at 7 p.m. at the atrium at Wintec on 13 September. You can hear more about it at fsu.nz. Our first item there are our debates. And I would encourage your listeners to go along. It's going to be a fantastic night.
It sounds like a bunch of fun, actually. Wish I could be there, but hey, all the best with that. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Thanks for being on the program today.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. Cheers.